High above the mortal world, where silver clouds drifted beneath floating palaces carved from living starlight, Haley once believed the gods were capable of love. She had spent centuries believing that sacrifice was sacred, that devotion would be rewarded, and that fate favored those willing to endure suffering for others. As the daughter of a sea goddess and a mortal king, she belonged nowhere completely. The heavens viewed her as impure, while humans saw her as unreachable. Yet none of that mattered when she met Aeneas, the war god whose laughter could silence storms and whose spear had defended entire kingdoms from annihilation. She loved him with a sincerity that frightened even herself. When Aeneas fell during the War of Seven Suns, pierced by a cursed weapon forged in the void, every healer in heaven failed to save him. His divine essence unraveled day by day, and prophecies foretold his death. Haley ignored every warning. Ancient texts spoke of a forbidden ritual requiring the blood of a demigod. The process would bind the donor's life to the recipient forever. If the recipient died, the donor would die as well. If the recipient suffered, the donor would share the pain. It was considered a fate worse than death. Haley never hesitated. In a hidden temple beneath the ocean floor, she poured her blood into sacred fire for 7 days and 7 nights. When the ritual ended, Aeneas survived. Haley nearly died. 4 months afterward she could barely walk. Her divine powers weakened. Her hair lost its golden shine. Yet every time Aeneas smiled at her, she felt the sacrifice had been worthwhile. Then everything changed. On the day she planned to confess her feelings, she entered the Garden of Dawn Blossoms and found Aeneas kneeling before her younger sister Lyra. The war god held a ring of celestial crystal. His expression carried the tenderness Haley had dreamed of seeing directed toward herself. "Marry me," he whispered. The world shattered without making a sound. Haley stood frozen behind white flowering trees while Lyra accepted his proposal with tears in her eyes. Neither of them saw her leave. Neither knew she spent the entire night sitting alone on cliffs overlooking the endless sea, unable to understand why her chest hurt more than the ritual ever had. She tried convincing herself it was enough that Aeneas lived. She tried smiling during the wedding preparations. She tried blessing their future. But each attempt felt like forcing knives deeper into her heart. Then came the first betrayal. Lyra discovered the blood bond. Instead of gratitude, fear entered her eyes. She began whispering to other gods. Rumors spread. Some claimed Haley used forbidden magic to bind Aeneas against his will. Others insisted she secretly desired his throne. The stories grew darker each month. Aeneas heard them all. He never asked Haley for the truth. He never defended her. That silence wounded her more than any accusation. 3 years passed. By then Haley had become an outsider in heaven. Invitations vanished. Friends avoided her. Priests refused to meet her gaze. When she learned she carried a child conceived during a brief relationship with Aeneas before his engagement to Lyra, she kept the secret hidden. She dreamed of raising the baby far from divine politics. For the first time in years, hope returned. It lasted 12 days. Lyra discovered the pregnancy. Panic swept through heaven. If the child existed, questions would arise. Aeneas's reputation would suffer. So a council gathered in secret. Haley was arrested under false charges of treason. Chains forged from celestial iron were locked around her wrists. She begged to know what crime she had committed. Nobody answered. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Deep beneath the heavenly capital, inside a prison where sunlight never entered, Haley endured interrogations designed to break divine beings. She waited for Aeneas to come. He never did. One night, after endless torture weakened her body, she lost the child. No ceremony marked its passing. No one comforted her. She lay alone on a stone floor, clutching her stomach while tears soaked the darkness around her. Something inside her died alongside the baby. Not her love. Love is stubborn. What died was her faith. 3 years later, opportunity arrived disguised as catastrophe. A monstrous creature from the abyss attacked heaven's outer gates. Amid the chaos, prison defenses collapsed. Haley escaped through tunnels abandoned centuries ago. She expected pursuit. Instead, she found emptiness. Nobody noticed she was gone. Nobody cared. She crossed wastelands between realms, descending farther than any god willingly traveled. Mountains became black skeletons against crimson skies. Rivers flowed upward. The stars disappeared. Eventually she reached the abyss, birthplace of demons and forgotten nightmares. There, exhausted and starving, she collapsed beside a ruined temple. When she awakened, a stranger sat nearby. He wore black armor covered in cracks glowing with faint blue fire. Silver hair hung across his face. Ancient scars marked his hands. Most unsettling were his eyes, one gold, one crimson. He offered her water without speaking. Haley accepted cautiously. "You're far from heaven," he finally said. His voice sounded rough, as though unused for years. "Good," Haley replied. A faint smile appeared. "Then perhaps you're in the right place." His name was Kale. Once he had ruled vast territories of the abyss until a curse transformed him into something feared by demons and gods alike. Every person he loved eventually died because the curse fed on attachment. Entire kingdoms abandoned him. Even his own followers refused to remain near him. Unlike heavenly nobles, Kale never asked about her past. He simply provided shelter. Days became months. Haley helped rebuild villages destroyed by demonic wars. She healed wounded children. She learned that monsters often displayed more kindness than gods. Kale remained distant, but she noticed small gestures. He repaired a broken chair before she could sit. He left books outside her room after overhearing her mention missing libraries. During storms he silently placed extra blankets nearby. No grand declarations. No dramatic promises. Just consistent care. One evening they stood atop cliffs overlooking endless darkness. "Why do you stay?" Kale asked suddenly. "Everyone else leaves eventually." Haley considered the question. "Because you're the first person in years who hasn't asked me to prove my worth." For a long moment he stared at the horizon. Then he laughed softly, surprised by the sound himself. The relationship grew slowly. Neither trusted easily. Both carried wounds. Yet every shared meal, every conversation, every quiet moment stitched invisible threads between them. When Kale finally confessed his feelings, there were no speeches. He simply looked nervous. Terrified, actually. "I know I'm cursed," he said. "I know this is foolish. But if I never tell you, I'll regret it forever." Haley kissed him before he finished. A year later they married beneath an ancient tree whose roots stretched through multiple realms. Demons attended alongside villagers. Children tossed glowing flowers. For the first time since losing her child, Haley felt genuine happiness. Then heaven discovered where she was. News reached Aeneas during a military campaign. At first he dismissed it. Haley had vanished years earlier. Surely the report was mistaken. Then spies confirmed everything. She was alive. Married. Smiling. The realization struck him harder than any battlefield wound. Memories he had buried resurfaced. The blood ritual. Her loyalty. Her countless sacrifices. Questions emerged. Why had she never defended herself? Why had she accepted punishment without resistance? He began investigating. The truth horrified him. Witnesses revealed Lyra manipulated evidence. Council records exposed fabricated charges. Prison documents confirmed Haley's suffering. And hidden among sealed archives he discovered medical reports detailing the loss of their unborn child. Aeneas stared at the papers until dawn. His hands shook uncontrollably. Every justification he had clung to collapsed. He had not merely failed her. He had abandoned her when she needed him most. Rage followed guilt.
Lyra tried explaining. He refused to listen. Their marriage ended that same day.
Heavenly politics erupted into chaos as Aeneas publicly denounced influential gods involved in Halley's imprisonment.
Some were stripped of power. Others fled. Yet none of it eased the hollow ache growing inside him. So he traveled to the abyss. Alone. Unarmed.
When he finally saw Halley again, she stood in a marketplace helping a child choose fruit.
Sunlight from a crimson sky illuminated her face. She looked healthier than he remembered. Happier. The sight simultaneously relieved and devastated him. Halley noticed him moments later. Her smile disappeared. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Simply gone, as if extinguished. "Halley," he said. She stared silently. "I came to apologize." "You're late." Her answer remained calm. That frightened him more than fury would have. "I know. 3 years in prison. I know. Our child died." Aeneas closed his eyes. "I know. Then what exactly are you apologizing for?" He opened his mouth but no words emerged. Because no apology could encompass the damage. No sentence could restore stolen years. Halley nodded as though confirming a conclusion already reached. Then she turned away. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Yet it left Aeneas shattered. Most people would have surrendered. Aeneas did not. Over following months he remained in the abyss. He helped rebuild villages. Defended civilians from monsters. Refused special treatment. He never pressured Halley. Never demanded forgiveness. Sometimes weeks passed without speaking. Kale watched everything carefully. One evening he confronted the war god. "You still love her?" "Yes. She doesn't belong to you." "I know." Kale studied him for several seconds. "Then why stay?" Aeneas looked toward distant lights where Halley lived. "Because leaving would be easier for me. Staying helps her people." Unexpected respect flickered across Kale's face. Before either man could speak further, the ground trembled violently. Far beyond the horizon, a massive crack split the sky itself. Black lightning erupted across multiple realms. Ancient alarms echoed through heaven, earth, and the abyss simultaneously. Something imprisoned before recorded history had awakened. And as terrified messengers arrived bearing impossible news, Halley learned that the creature emerging from the cosmic fracture was directly connected to the child she had lost years ago. The messenger collapsed before reaching the village square. Dust covered his armor, and one horn had been broken clean from his head. Around him gathered demons, merchants, travelers, and farmers who had abandoned their work after witnessing the distant wound spreading across the sky. Black lightning continued crawling through the heavens like living veins. Halley knelt beside the messenger and pressed glowing fingers against his chest. His heartbeat raced wildly. "Slow down," she said. "Tell us what happened." The messenger swallowed hard. The vault of silence opened. Conversations died instantly. Even children stopped moving. Kale's expression darkened. Aeneas, standing near a fountain, immediately understood the significance. The vault of silence was older than heaven itself. According to legend, it contained beings erased from history because their existence threatened reality. Entire civilizations had been sacrificed to keep those entities imprisoned. "Impossible," Kale muttered. "The seals cannot break." They did. The messenger pointed toward the fractured horizon. And something came out asking for Halley. Every eye turned toward her. The square suddenly felt much smaller. Halley slowly stood. "Why would an ancient prisoner know my name?" The messenger's face twisted with confusion. It called itself Asterion. The name struck her like a physical blow. For several seconds she forgot how to breathe. No one else recognized it. But she did. Asterion had been the name she secretly chose for her unborn child. She had never told anyone. Not an alias. Not Lyra. Not even herself aloud. The name existed only inside her heart. Yet somehow a creature imprisoned before history knew it. "That's impossible," she whispered. Kale immediately noticed the change in her expression. "You know that name?" Haley could not answer. A cold sensation crawled up her spine. Memories surfaced unexpectedly. During her pregnancy, she occasionally dreamed of a boy standing beside a black ocean beneath unfamiliar stars. Each dream ended before she could see his face. Endure? Could it grow? Could it cross impossible distances? Could it survive loss? Could it survive endings? Could it survive death itself? The creator pointed toward the chain. The endless network connecting realities. Connecting lives. Connecting futures. There is your answer. The witness looked. And for perhaps the millionth time since meeting Asterion, found itself speechless. Because the answer was obvious. Death had taken Asterion. Love had brought him back. Death had erased universes. Love had restored them. Death had ended stories. Love had carried them forward. The chain glittered across eternity. Living proof. The creator stood. "Come. Where are we going?" The ancient being smiled. "There's something I want to show you." The witness followed. Together they crossed realities. Past newborn universes. Past ancient galaxies. Past places untouched by the old cycle. Eventually they reached the edge of existence. Not the old edge. A new one. Beyond it stretched something neither had seen before. An ocean. Not made of water. Possibility. Infinite possibility. The creator stared at it with childlike wonder. "It's bigger than before." The witness looked confused. Before what? Before everything. The creator's voice carried quiet awe. "The future is growing." And it was. Reality itself was expanding faster than ever. Not physically. Narratively. Possibilities multiplied. Choices multiplied. Stories multiplied. The universe was no longer a structure. It was becoming a conversation. Back in the interdimensional capital, life continued. Haley and Kale eventually built a home overlooking a sea shared by multiple realities. Visitors arrived constantly. Students. Travelers. Former survivors. Children eager to hear stories. The house became famous. Not because of who lived there. Because everyone who visited left feeling welcome. Haley liked that. One evening, more than a century after the day she escaped heaven, she stood on the familiar cliffs overlooking the ocean. The same cliffs where she had once mourned. The same cliffs where she had once hoped. The same cliffs where she had learned how to begin again. Footsteps approached. She smiled before turning. Asterion. Her son joined her beside the cliff edge. Unlike most beings, he no longer appeared to age. Yet somehow he seemed older than ever. Wiser. Softer. More at peace. They watched the sunset together. The sky carried colors that hadn't existed during the old cycle. Entire realities reflected in the clouds. Beautiful. Strange. Alive. After a while, Asterion spoke. "Do you ever think about how close we came to losing everything?" Haley considered the question. Then nodded. "Sometimes." "And?" She smiled. "I spend more time thinking about what we found." Asterion looked at her. The answer felt exactly right. Below them, waves rolled against ancient stone. Above them, the chain connected worlds. Far beyond sight, new universes awakened. And somewhere in the endless future, stories continued unfolding. Not because they were destined to, Because people chose them. Because love remained stubborn. Because hope remained unreasonable. Because life remained gloriously unpredictable.
The sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon.
Darkness arrived. Then stars emerged. More stars than had ever existed during the age of the cycle. More possibilities. More beginnings. Haley looked upward. Esterion followed her gaze. Neither spoke. Words weren't necessary. The future stretched before them. Infinite. Unwritten. Waiting.
And for the first time since the beginning of creation, that was not something to fear.
It was something to celebrate. The end.
The end, as it turned out, was merely a word people used when they could not yet see the next horizon. Nearly 2 centuries after the fall of the old cycle, existence had become so vast that even the most ambitious maps resembled sketches drawn by children attempting to capture an ocean. New realities blossomed every day. Entire civilizations emerged within regions of possibility that had not existed during the Age of Fate. Travelers crossed between universes as casually as merchants once crossed rivers. Languages merged, evolved, and separated again. Art forms appeared that combined music, memory, and light into living performances. Yet despite all the wonder, one truth remained unchanged. Every generation still faced questions no previous generation could answer. That truth revealed itself on a quiet evening when Esterion received a visitor unlike any he had encountered before. He was walking through the Garden of Echoing Stars, a sanctuary suspended between 17 realities, when he noticed a young woman sitting beneath a silver tree. Nothing about her appearance seemed remarkable at first. Simple clothing. Dark hair. Calm expression. Yet every flower in the garden had turned toward her. Even the wind appeared reluctant to disturb the air around her. Esterion stopped. The woman looked up and smiled politely. "Hello." "Hello." Neither moved. Then Esterion frowned slightly. "Do I know you?" The woman considered the question. "Not yet." That answer immediately made him suspicious. "You're speaking like the creator." "I've spent time with them." "That's never a good sign." The woman laughed. To his surprise, the sound carried no hidden power. No cosmic significance. Just genuine amusement. "I've heard people say that before." Esterion sat on a nearby stone bench. "All right. Who are you?" The woman looked toward the stars. "My name is Lyra. And I come from the future." Esterion stared at her. "Of course you do. You're taking this surprisingly well. After everything I've experienced, time travel barely reaches the top 20. Lyra smiled. "Fair." For several moments they sat in silence. Finally Esterion asked the obvious question. "How far into the future?" "Far enough that nobody alive today can imagine it." His expression grew more serious. "Why are you here?" Lyra's smile faded. "Because something is happening." The words immediately changed the atmosphere. Esterion felt it. Not danger exactly. Concern. Genuine concern. What kind of something? Lyra reached into her pocket and removed a small object. At first glance it appeared to be an ordinary chain link. Esterion's breath caught. The link looked almost identical to the one Haley had carried for centuries. Yet this one was cracked. Not broken. Cracked. Tiny fractures covered its surface. "What is that?" he asked quietly. Lyra placed the link in his hand. The moment his fingers touched it, visions exploded through his mind. Endless futures. Countless realities. Entire civilizations rising and falling. The chain stretching across eternity. Then something new. Vast regions of silence. Not destruction. Absence. Connections fading. Relationships weakening. Communities isolating themselves.
Not because of hatred. Because of comfort. The vision ended abruptly. Astarion sat very still. That's impossible. Lyra looked sad. I know. He stared at the cracked link. The chain isn't dying. No. Then what am I seeing? Lyra folded her hands together. The first challenge freedom created. Astarion listened carefully. People fought to preserve connection during the Age of Endings. They valued one another because loss was real. She looked toward distant realities glowing beyond the garden. But after enough peace, after enough prosperity, after enough generations who never experienced hardship, understanding slowly dawned. They stopped trying. Lyra nodded. Not all at once. Not intentionally. Her voice carried no accusation. Only sadness. They simply forgot why connection mattered. Astarion stared at the stars. The possibility disturbed him more than any enemy ever had. No monster. No cosmic executioner. No war. Just gradual indifference. Lyra continued. The chain survives through choice. It always has. I know. Future generations know that too. She smiled faintly. The problem is that knowledge isn't the same thing as belief. Astarion leaned back and closed his eyes. For the first time in centuries, he felt uncertain. Not because he lacked power. Because power offered no solution. You could defeat an army. You could seal an executioner. You could save a universe. But how did you convince people to care? The answer could not be forced. The moment connection became obligation, it ceased being genuine. Lyra watched his expression carefully. That's why I came. To warn me? No. Astarion opened his eyes. Then why? Her smile returned. Warm. Hopeful. Familiar in a way he couldn't immediately explain. Because you always ask the wrong question first. He blinked. Excuse me? You're wondering how to stop this. Naturally. The better question is whether it was ever truly a problem. Silence followed. Astarion frowned. Lyra stood and walked toward the edge of the garden. Come with me. Before he could respond, reality unfolded around them. Not violently. Gently. Like a book opening. Astarion found himself standing atop a hill beneath an unfamiliar sky. Strange constellations shimmered overhead. Cities glowed in the distance. People filled the streets below. Ordinary people living ordinary lives. What am I looking at? He asked. Lyra smiled. The future. They watched quietly. A woman stopped to help a stranger carry supplies. Children shared food during a festival. Musicians played in a crowded square. Friends laughed together. Families reunited after long journeys. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing legendary. Just life. Then Astarion noticed something. No visible chain connected these people. No sparks. No cosmic network. Yet the same kindness remained. The same love. The same choices. Lyra watched realization spread across his face. The chain was never the destination, she said softly. It was a bridge. Astarion remained silent. Eventually people stopped needing bridges. The wind carried distant laughter across the hilltop. The future doesn't forget connection. Her eyes shone beneath unfamiliar stars. The future becomes it. For a long time, Astarion simply watched the city below. The creator had once asked whether love could become stronger than death. Looking at this distant future, he finally understood something even larger. The question had never been whether love could survive. The question was whether love could teach existence how to survive without needing to be reminded.
And somewhere beyond countless centuries, beyond myths and heroes and cosmic chains, ordinary people had quietly become the answer.
Lyra smiled as if she had been waiting for that realization all along.
Then she looked toward the horizon where dawn was beginning to rise over a future no prophecy had ever predicted.
"Come on," she said. "There are a few million years of history you haven't seen yet." And with that, another story began. Esturion followed Lyra. Not because he fully understood what was happening. Because curiosity had always been stronger than caution.
The future unfolded around them like pages turning in an endless book.
Cities vanished. Stars shifted. Entire galaxies drifted across the heavens. Esturion watched epochs pass in moments.
Yet despite the unimaginable scale, certain things remained surprisingly familiar.
People still argued. People still laughed. People still fell in love. People still made mistakes.
The details changed. The heart of existence did not.
Eventually Lyra slowed.
The rushing torrent of time settled.
Reality became still once more.
They stood upon a shoreline beneath a sky unlike any Esturion had ever seen.
3 suns hovered above an ocean of liquid light.
Massive crystalline structures rose from distant waters. The air itself glowed softly.
"What year is this?" Esturion asked.
Lyra tilted her head.
"We stopped counting years a long time ago."
"Helpful.
You'll get used to that." He doubted it.
Nearby, several figures walked along the glowing beach.
At first glance they appeared human. Then Esturion noticed subtle differences.
Their bodies contained traces of starlight.
Their shadows moved independently.
Their eyes reflected entire constellations.
"What are they?" Lyra smiled. "People. That doesn't answer anything. It answers the important part." The two
watched as one of the luminous figures knelt beside a strange sea creature tangled in crystalline vines. The creature was enormous. Several stories tall. Yet the person approached it without fear. After a brief struggle, the creature was freed.
It responded by gently nudging the rescuer before disappearing beneath the glowing waves.
Esturion found himself smiling.
No chains. No sparks. No cosmic network. Lyra nodded toward the distant figures. And yet, Esturion understood. Connection remained. Not because an external force sustained it. Because civilization itself had evolved around it. Compassion was no longer a lesson being taught.
It had become part of the foundation. Part of the culture. Part of life.
The realization brought unexpected peace. For centuries he
had worried about the chain.
Protected it. Maintained it. Feared its loss.
Now he saw something remarkable.
The chain had succeeded by eventually becoming unnecessary. Not disappearing. Graduating.
The thought made him laugh.
Lyra glanced at him. "What?"
"I spent hundreds of years worrying about preserving a bridge."
And? Esturion looked toward the horizon.
The bridge was teaching people how to build roads.
Lyra grinned. Exactly.
For a while they walked along the shoreline. The glowing ocean stretched endlessly beside them.
Eventually they reached a cliff overlooking an enormous city. Esturion stopped.
Even after everything he had witnessed, the sight stole his breath.
The city floated. Not above the ground. Between dimensions. Entire districts occupied overlapping realities simultaneously. Gardens existed inside living nebulae.
Libraries stretched across folded space. Rivers flowed upward into the stars. Millions upon millions of people moved through the city.
Different species. Different origins. Different histories. All living together. Not perfectly.
No society ever achieved perfection.
But successfully. Thriving. Esterion watched in silence. Then something caught his attention. Near the center of the city stood a monument. Simple. Elegant. A single chain link. His expression immediately became suspicious. No. Lyra laughed. Yes. No. You have statues. I specifically asked people not to build statues. They didn't listen.
Esterion buried his face in his hands.
Of course they didn't. Lyra guided him toward the monument.
As they approached, he noticed something unusual.
There was no name. No inscription. No explanation. Just the chain link. Thousands of people passed it every day without stopping. Without worshipping. Without treating it as sacred. Eventually Esterion asked why.
An elderly citizen sitting nearby overheard. The woman smiled warmly.
It's a reminder. Of what? Esterion asked.
She looked surprised by the question. That nobody survives alone.
Simple. Direct. No legends. No mythology. No glorification. Just truth.
The elderly woman returned to her book.
The conversation ended.
Yet Esterion stood staring at the monument long afterward.
Nobody remembered him personally anymore.
The timescale made that inevitable. Millions of years had passed.
Names faded. Faces faded. Stories changed.
Yet the lesson remained.
Nobody survives alone. Somehow that felt right. Later that evening, Lyra brought him somewhere else. The edge of known reality. Again.
But this edge differed from the one he remembered. The old frontier had once represented possibility.
This one represented mystery. Beyond it stretched darkness. Not empty darkness. Unexplored darkness.
The future still contained unknowns.
Even now. Even after all this time. Esterion noticed countless ships gathered near the boundary. Exploration vessels. Research expeditions. Dreamers. Adventurers. People preparing to venture beyond the map. What are they looking for? He asked. Lyra smiled. The same thing every generation looks for. Which is? Whatever comes next. The answer felt oddly perfect. One vessel began moving. Then another. Then dozens more.
Thousands of explorers crossed the boundary together.
Leaving certainty behind. Seeking something new. Esterion watched them disappear into the darkness.
Then he felt a familiar presence.
He turned. The creator stood nearby. Looking exactly as amused as always. Enjoying yourself? Esterion sighed. You're still around? Someone has to supervise. You specifically said you weren't supervising. I'm supervising recreationally. Esterion laughed. Some things apparently remained eternal. The creator joined them at the edge of reality.
For a while the three simply watched the departing explorers.
Finally Esterion asked a question that had lingered for centuries. Are you satisfied? The creator considered it. Then shook their head. Esterion blinked. No? No. Why not? The ancient being smiled. Because satisfaction implies completion.
The creator gestured toward the darkness beyond the
frontier. Toward the explorers. Toward the endless future. Look. Esterion did. Ships vanished into mystery. New stories began. New possibilities emerged. New questions waited.
The creator's voice softened.
Existence is alive.
The words carried unusual tenderness.
As long as it remains alive, it remains unfinished. Silence followed. Then understanding. The goal had never been completion. Never perfection. Never a final answer. The goal was continuation. Growth. Discovery. Wonder. Life. The creator looked genuinely happy. The experiment didn't end. Esterion raised an eyebrow. It didn't? No. The creator grinned. It became self-sustaining. For the first time in a very long while, Esterion felt no responsibility. No burden. No destiny. No cosmic obligation. Existence no longer depended upon him. The chain no longer needed guarding. The future belonged to itself. And surprisingly, that realization brought joy rather than sadness. He had spent so long protecting tomorrow. Now tomorrow could protect itself. The creator seemed to sense his thoughts. You did well. The simple words carried unexpected weight. Esterion looked away. Embarrassed. The creator laughed. You're still terrible at accepting compliments. Probably. Definitely. Lyra smiled quietly beside them. The stars above continued expanding. The frontier remained open. The explorers continued their journey. And somewhere far beyond even this future, beyond millions of years, beyond civilizations yet unborn, existence continued writing itself. Not through fate. Not through prophecy. Not through divine design. Through choice. Through connection. Through countless ordinary lives intersecting in extraordinary ways. The same truth that had once saved a single frightened child. The same truth that had once healed a broken mother. The same truth that had once transformed a demon king, a war god, an observer, and even a creator. Nobody survives alone. The lesson endured. The future endured. And beyond the final horizon, where even imagination struggled to follow, new beginnings waited patiently for someone brave enough to find them. Beyond the final horizon, the explorers found something that should not have existed. At first, nobody understood what they were seeing. The reports arrived slowly. Fragmented. Confused. Contradictory. Entire expedition fleets transmitted the same impossible description using completely different words. Some called it a city. Others called it a memory. Several scientists insisted it was a living equation. One poet described it as a place where tomorrow goes to dream. The scientific community strongly objected to that definition. Unfortunately, it proved surprisingly accurate. The phenomenon existed beyond mapped reality. Beyond the frontier. Beyond every region explored since the collapse of the cycle. When long-range observations finally succeeded, the results created immediate controversy. The structure appeared infinite. Not large. Infinite. Its architecture shifted continuously. Streets rearranged themselves. Buildings transformed. Entire districts appeared and vanished. Yet despite the constant change, the place remained coherent. Purposeful. Alive. Naturally, everyone wanted to investigate. Naturally, nobody could agree on how. Esterion found the entire situation amusing. Especially because he was no longer responsible for solving cosmic problems. That lasted approximately 3 days. Then representatives from 17 realities arrived at his home simultaneously. I knew this would happen, he muttered. Haley looked up from her book. You complain every time. Because every time I'm correct. The door opened. More representatives entered. Esterion sighed dramatically. I haven't saved reality in millions of years. One diplomat smiled apologetically. That's technically true. Technically? Several historians still argue your influence continues. Esterion pointed toward the door. Out. Nobody left. Within hours, a planning committee had formed. Within days, an expedition was organized. Within weeks, Esterion somehow found himself standing aboard a vessel headed toward the impossible city. Again. Always again. The universe apparently refused to let him retire peacefully. The creator found this hilarious. When informed of the situation, the ancient being laughed for 6 straight minutes. Estiurian was not pleased. Eventually the expedition reached its destination. Silence filled the command deck. Even experienced explorers struggled to process the sight. The city stretched across existence itself. Entire galaxies seemed embedded within its foundations. Roads curved through dimensions. Towers reached beyond visibility. Countless lights illuminated pathways leading into impossible distances. Yet what disturbed everyone most was a single observation. The city appeared familiar. Not personally familiar. Emotionally familiar. Every observer felt it. The strange certainty that they had somehow been there before. Estiurian stepped onto a viewing platform. The sensation hit immediately. Recognition. Not memory. Recognition. As though some part of him understood the city instinctively. "Do you feel it?" one scientist whispered. Everyone nodded. Nobody liked it. The expedition proceeded cautiously. Ships entered the outer districts. Scanners activated. Research teams deployed. Nothing attacked. Nothing resisted. Nothing even acknowledged their presence. The city simply existed. Waiting. Hours became days. Days became weeks. The deeper they traveled, the stranger things became. Libraries containing books written in languages that had not yet been invented. Gardens growing extinct species from futures that never occurred. Museums displaying artifacts from timelines that had been abandoned before they fully formed. The city contained possibilities. Not realities. Possibilities. Every path existence could have taken. Every choice. Every future. Preserved. Documented. Remembered. Estiurian wandered through one enormous hall lined with crystal mirrors. Each mirror displayed a different life. Different versions of people. Different outcomes. Different stories. One showed a universe where Haley never escaped heaven. Another showed a reality where Kale never met her. A third displayed a timeline where Estiurian himself had never been born. He quickly stopped looking. Some knowledge served no purpose. At the center of the city stood a tower. Of course there was a tower. There was always a tower. Estiurian hated how predictable that felt. The expedition gathered at its base. The structure appeared simple compared to everything surrounding it. White stone. No decorations. No visible entrances. Just a single doorway. Open. Waiting. Naturally, everyone immediately argued about whether entering was a terrible idea. The debate lasted 8 hours. Eventually curiosity won. It usually did. Inside the tower, they found a staircase. Nothing else. Just stairs. Ascending forever. Or so it seemed. The climb lasted longer than mathematics suggested possible. Days passed. Yet nobody grew tired. Nobody grew hungry. Nobody even felt the passage of time normally. Finally they reached the summit. The room waiting there was unexpectedly small. Circular. Quiet. Empty except for one chair. And someone sitting in it. The figure appeared ordinary. Young. Perhaps 20 years old. Simple clothing. Dark hair. Calm eyes. The person looked up as the expedition entered. Then smiled. Not politely. Not mysteriously. Warmly. Like someone greeting old friends. Hello. Nobody moved. The young figure seemed unsurprised. I was wondering how long it would take. Asterion stepped forward cautiously. Who are you? The figure considered the question. Then laughed softly. I've been trying to answer that myself. That was not encouraging. The young person stood. The room brightened slightly. Not because of power. Recognition. The entire city seemed aware of them. Connected to them. One scientist whispered something under her breath. Asterion barely heard it. Yet everyone else had clearly reached the same conclusion. The impossible city. The preserved possibilities. The countless futures. The living architecture. The sensation of familiarity. It all pointed toward the same answer. The young figure smiled again. You figured it out. Asterion stared. No. The figure nodded. Yes. Silence followed. The expedition members exchanged stunned looks. Finally someone spoke the realization aloud. You are the future. The young person laughed. That's a dramatic way to phrase it. Is it wrong? The figure looked around the room. Around the city. Around the endless archive of possibilities. Then shook their head. Not entirely. Nobody knew how to respond. The young person walked toward a nearby window overlooking infinite realities. When existence became free, something unexpected happened. The voice carried quiet wonder. Possibility itself began growing. Outside, entire futures shimmered beyond sight. The figure continued. The old cycle created outcomes. A pause. Freedom created potential. The distinction mattered. The expedition sensed it immediately. The young figure touched the glass. Thousands of unrealized futures illuminated simultaneously. Eventually potential became complex enough to develop awareness. Asterion slowly closed his eyes. Of course it did. The figure laughed. That was my reaction too. Silence followed. Then a realization struck him. A strange one. A familiar one. The figure noticed immediately. You understand, don't you? Asterion nodded slowly. You're not a person. Correct. Not exactly. Also correct. You are possibility. The figure smiled. The entire city brightened. Closer. Asterion looked out at the endless futures waiting beyond the glass. Then finally understood. Not possibility. Choice. The living accumulation of every choice ever made. Every path selected. Every future imagined. Every act of courage. Every act of love. Every decision that transformed uncertainty into reality. A consciousness born from freedom itself. The figure's smile widened. Hello, Asterion. The city glowed brighter than 1,000 galaxies. I am what happened next. And for the second time in his existence, Asterion found himself standing before something entirely new. Something not created by gods, not governed by fate, not predicted by any prophecy. A living future that had emerged from the simple truth that once saved a broken family and eventually transformed existence itself. Every choice mattered. And now, that truth had awakened. The room remained silent for a very long time. Not fearful silence. Not confused silence. The kind of silence that followed the appearance of an idea so large that language needed time to catch up. A living future. A consciousness born from choice. The expedition members stared at the figure standing before them. The figure stared back with obvious sympathy. I know. One scientist blinked. You know what? Exactly what you're thinking. The figure smiled. Everyone always gets a headache at this point. Several members of the expedition looked offended by how accurate that was. Asterion rubbed his forehead. I spent millions of years assuming existence had reached maximum weirdness. And yet. The figure laughed. The sound carried no cosmic authority. No divine weight. Just amusement. Oddly human. That detail unsettled Asterion more than anything else. Finally he asked the question that mattered. Why are you here? The figure tilted its head. I've always been here. That's not what I meant. I know. The smile softened. You want to know why I revealed myself? Yes. The figure walked toward the enormous window overlooking infinite unrealized futures. For a moment its form became translucent. Entire civilizations flickered beneath its skin. Entire histories. Entire possibilities. Then the image stabilized once more. Because something new was approaching. The room immediately became serious. Asterion sighed. Of course it is. The figure laughed again. You're remarkably consistent. I'm tired. You don't actually get tired anymore. I'm emotionally tired. Fair. The humor faded. The figure pointed beyond the city. Beyond the archive. Beyond even possibility itself. At first nobody saw anything. Then the stars shifted. A region of darkness became visible. Not empty darkness. Movement. Something vast. Something distant. Approaching. The expedition members exchanged nervous glances. One scientist activated several instruments. The readings immediately became incomprehensible. That's impossible. Asterion groaned. Please stop saying that. But it is. That never helps. The figure seemed amused by the exchange. Then its expression became thoughtful. This is difficult to explain. Try. The figure nodded. The creator built existence. Everyone followed so far. The cycle taught existence. Still understandable. The chain connected existence. Asterion frowned slightly. And? The figure looked toward the approaching darkness. And now existence has become visible. Silence. Nobody understood. The figure expected that. It turns out universes are not the only things capable of growing. That was not reassuring. The darkness beyond possibility moved again. Closer this time. The expedition could finally see faint details. Patterns. Structures. Lights. Not random. Organized. Purposeful. The figure continued. When the first universe was created, it existed alone. The room listened carefully. When the second universe appeared, they existed together. A pause. When countless universes emerged, they formed a system. Another pause. When reality became connected through the chain, it became a network. Asterion's eyes narrowed. Understanding began forming. Slowly. Dangerously. The figure noticed immediately. Yes. Asterion looked toward the approaching darkness. No. Yes. No. Very yes. The expedition members looked between them. One finally spoke. Would somebody explain? Asterion pointed toward the darkness. His voice carried a strange mixture of disbelief and admiration. That's another existence. Silence. Absolute silence. The scientist laughed nervously. Then stopped when nobody joined. The figure nodded. Correct. The room exploded into conversation. Questions. Arguments. Disbelief. Several people attempted complex mathematical calculations. One historian sat down abruptly. Another appeared delighted. A third looked ready to cry. The figure waited patiently. Eventually the noise settled. Then came the inevitable question. There are other realities outside reality? The figure considered. Not exactly. Then what? The answer changed everything. Other stories. Silence returned. The figure smiled. Existence is larger than universes. A gesture toward the approaching darkness. Much larger. The image expanded. Everyone could see it clearly now. Not a fleet. Not an empire. Not an invasion. A civilization. An entire civilization. Vast beyond comprehension. Traveling through whatever existed beyond possibility. Approaching. Not aggressively. Curiously. The realization spread through the room. They were being discovered. For ages existence had explored itself. Now something beyond it had found them. Asterion stared. Then laughed. The sound surprised even him. The figure raised an eyebrow. What's funny? Asterion shook his head. Everything. The figure seemed pleased. Good answer. Asterion looked toward the approaching civilization. Millions of questions flooded his mind. Who were they? Where had they come from? How old were they? What did they believe? What impossible stories had shaped them? The future, the living future, watched his expression carefully. Then smiled. You're excited. A little. A little? A lot. The figure nodded approvingly. Good. The city brightened. Possibilities unfolded around them. Countless potential meetings. Countless potential friendships. Countless potential misunderstandings. Countless potential futures. Not one of them predetermined. The figure turned toward the window. So? The smile widened. The next chapter begins. Asterion laughed again. Millions of years. Countless adventures. The collapse of the cycle. The restoration of dead universes. The awakening of possibility. And somehow existence still had new horizons. Still had mysteries. Still had surprises waiting beyond the map. The thought filled him with something he had not felt since childhood. Wonder. Pure wonder. The expedition began preparing immediately. Messages spread across realities. The news traveled faster than light, faster than thought, faster than probability. Other stories existed. Other civilizations existed. The frontier had expanded again. Back in the interdimensional capital, Haley received the first reports. She sat on the familiar cliff overlooking the sea. The same sea. The same horizon. Millions of years later. A messenger finished explaining the situation. Then waited. Haley stared at the sunset. The messenger shifted nervously. Lady Haley? She smiled. He's involved, isn't he? The messenger blinked. How did you know? Haley laughed softly. Some truths never changed. No matter how large existence became. No matter how many realities emerged. No matter how many impossible things happened. Her son remained exactly the sort of person who would somehow discover an entirely new layer of creation. The messenger waited. Haley rose from her seat. The ocean shimmered beneath countless stars. Far beyond those stars waited another civilization. Another story. Another beginning. She smiled toward the horizon. Then toward the future. Then toward the endless possibilities still waiting to be explored. Well, she said. The familiar word drifted across the wind. A word spoken by creators. Observers. Dreamers. Explorers. A word that always seemed to appear before something extraordinary happened. Let's see what happens next. And somewhere beyond reality, beyond possibility, beyond even the living future itself, a new story began moving toward them. Not as an ending. Not as a threat. As an introduction, the first message arrived 3 months later. Not through technology. Not through magic. Not through any method known to the civilizations of existence. It simply appeared. Everywhere. At the same moment. A sentence written across the sky of every reality. Across every restored universe. Across every inhabited world. Across every city, village, station, garden, and frontier settlement. People looked up and saw the same words glowing among the stars. Hello. That was all. One word. Simple. Polite. The reaction was chaos. Entire governments mobilized. Scientific institutions held emergency meetings. Religious leaders announced contradictory interpretations within minutes. Historians became unbearably excited. Children thought it was wonderful. The Creator laughed so hard they temporarily disappeared from observable reality. The witness spent 2 weeks trying to determine how the message had been delivered. The answer only made things worse. Nobody could find a mechanism. No signal. No transmission. No detectable process. The greeting had somehow bypassed every known layer of existence. It simply arrived. The living future found this delightful. Estiarian found it concerning. You always find everything delightful. The future shrugged. I am literally composed of possibilities. That's not an excuse. It's a very good excuse. Meanwhile, preparation accelerated. The approaching civilization continued moving closer. Not rapidly. Purposefully. As though they understood that first impressions mattered. Entire diplomatic teams assembled. Translation systems were developed. Cultural archives were prepared. Thousands of volunteers offered to participate in first contact. Millions argued about who should represent existence. Eventually the debate became so large that a simpler solution emerged. Everyone would. Not individually. Collectively. The first meeting would occur in the City of Possibilities. The living archive beyond the frontier. Neutral territory. A place belonging to no single civilization. No single universe. No single species. The decision proved surprisingly popular. The Creator approved. The future approved. The witness approved. Even Kale approved after complaining for several hours. Which counted as enthusiasm by his standards. Then came the waiting. Months passed. The mysterious civilization drew closer. More messages appeared. Never many. Never dramatic. Short observations. Questions. Greetings. Curiosities. Your music is interesting. Why do you enjoy stories about dragons? We like your oceans. One of US has become obsessed with bread. That particular message caused confusion throughout several realities. Eventually someone sent back recipes. The response arrived 2 hours later. Thank you. Nobody knew how to feel about that. The correspondence continued. Slowly. Carefully. The tone remained consistently friendly. Almost disarmingly so. Then, 1 year after the first message, they arrived. Every reality watched. The City of Possibilities prepared. Representatives gathered. Scholars. Artists. Explorers. Builders. Dreamers. People chosen not because they held power. Because they represented life. The living future stood near the city's central plaza. Estiarian beside it. Haley. Kale. Enalius. The Witness. The Creator. Millions more filled surrounding districts. Then the sky changed. No dramatic explosion. No cosmic spectacle. The stars simply moved aside. Space unfolded. And something emerged. Silence spread immediately. Not because the visitors appeared frightening. Because they appeared familiar. Not physically. Emotionally. The same strange recognition everyone had felt upon entering the city of possibilities. The same sensation of encountering something connected. Related. The first vessel descended slowly. Its design resembled nothing anyone had seen before. Not mechanical. Not organic. Not architectural. It looked like a story-given shape. Curves flowing into symbols. Symbols flowing into light. Light flowing into meaning. The vessel settled gently within the plaza. A doorway appeared. Then opened. Everyone held their breath. A figure stepped forward. Tall. Elegant. Wearing clothing woven from shifting patterns. The visitor looked around. Studied the gathered crowd. Then smiled. Warmly. Genuinely. Exactly the way a traveler might smile upon reaching a long-sought destination. The silence lasted several seconds. Then the visitor spoke. The voice carried clearly across the city. Hello. Esterian blinked. The visitor blinked back. Then pointed directly at him. You. Esterian immediately became suspicious. Me? The visitor looked delighted. Yes. Oh no. The visitor laughed. You say that often. The crowd exchanged confused glances. Esterian frowned. Have we met? The visitor tilted their head. Then answered with complete sincerity. Not yet. The creator immediately started laughing. The witness groaned. The living future covered its face. Esterian closed his eyes. Absolutely not. The visitor looked puzzled. What? I am not doing another time loop. Time loop? Future visitor. Familiar dialogue. Mysterious smile. The visitor thought about it. Then nodded. Reasonable concern. The crowd began laughing. The tension evaporated. Whatever anyone had expected from first contact, it had not been this. The visitor stepped closer. We come in peace. That's good. We come in curiosity. Also good. We come because we heard stories. Esterian sighed. There it was. Stories. It always came back to stories. What stories? The visitor smiled. The impossible universe. Silence returned. The visitor gestured toward the gathered realities. The universe that escaped its ending. Toward the restored worlds. The universe that taught death how to lose. Toward the chain. The universe that turned connection into creation. Toward the living future. The universe that produced possibility itself. The visitor's eyes brightened. Nobody believed it. Esterian looked toward Haley. Haley looked toward Kale. Kale looked toward the creator. The creator looked extremely pleased. The visitor continued. So naturally we had to see for ourselves. More vessels appeared overhead. Not an invasion. Not a fleet. Travelers. Countless travelers. Explorers from another story. Another existence. Another beginning. The visitor extended a hand. Not a diplomatic gesture. Not a ritual. A greeting. Simple. Human. Familiar. Esterian looked at the offered hand. Then smiled. After everything. After endings and rebirths. After cycles and chains. After millions of years. Existence had reached the oldest moment in any story. A stranger saying hello. He accepted the handshake. The plaza erupted into cheers. The stars brightened. New possibilities unfolded.
And somewhere beyond all maps, beyond all frontiers, beyond all previous horizons, countless new stories awakened.
Not because anyone planned them. Not because destiny demanded them.
But because two civilizations looked at each other across the unknown and decided that curiosity was more interesting than fear. And as the celebration spread across realities, the Creator quietly watched from the edge of the crowd.
The ancient being smiled.
Then looked upward. Toward mysteries even they did not yet understand.
Toward questions still unanswered.
Toward horizons still unseen. Because the greatest truth existence had discovered was also the simplest. No matter how far the journey continued, there was always another horizon waiting beyond the last one. And somewhere beyond that horizon, another person was preparing to say hello.
The handshake should have been a small moment. A greeting. A symbolic beginning. Nothing more. Instead, it changed everything. The instant Asterian's hand met the visitors, both civilizations felt it. Not physically. Not magically. Narratively. A new connection formed. The chain brightened across countless realities.
At the same time, something equally vast awakened within the visitor's existence.
A network. Different from the chain. Yet strangely similar. For a brief instant, both systems touched.
The result spread across worlds like ripples across water.
People saw flashes. Not memories. Glimpses. Children in distant galaxies laughing beneath unfamiliar stars. Artists painting with materials that did not exist in this universe. Explorers crossing oceans of living mathematics. Families gathering around tables shaped from crystallized light. Ordinary moments. Beautiful moments. Life. When the vision ended, silence filled the plaza. The visitor looked stunned. Asterian looked equally surprised.
The Creator, meanwhile, appeared so delighted that several nearby scholars immediately became nervous. That expression never led to simple outcomes.
What just happened? Asterian asked.
The visitor laughed softly.
We connected. I gathered that. No. The visitor's smile widened.
I mean our stories connected. The living future appeared beside them instantly. For the first time since anyone had met it, the embodiment of possibility looked genuinely astonished.
That shouldn't have happened. The Creator immediately pointed. There it is again. The future ignored them.
The visitor looked curiously at the future.
Then froze. Recognition crossed their face. Not complete recognition. Partial. Like someone remembering a dream. You.
The future blinked.
Me?
The visitor nodded slowly.
We have something like you. The plaza became very quiet. The future frowned. What do you mean?
The visitor looked toward the sky.
Searching for words. Eventually they found them. We call it the horizon.
The Creator stopped smiling. The witness looked up sharply.
Even Asterian sensed the shift. Something important had just been said. What is the horizon? Haley asked. The visitor hesitated. Then answered. The place where possibilities go after they become real. Nobody understood. The visitor expected that. It's difficult to explain.
The future folded its arms.
Try. The visitor nodded. In our existence, every choice creates possibility. Asterian immediately groaned. Of course it does. The visitor ignored him. Most possibilities eventually become reality. Everyone followed so far. But some don't. A pause. Some remain unresolved.
The future's expression slowly changed.
The visitor noticed. You're beginning to understand. The future nodded. Slowly. Carefully. I think I am.
The Creator watched both of them with growing interest.
The visitor continued. Over billions of years, those unrealized possibilities accumulated. Asterion frowned. Accumulated where? The answer chilled the plaza. We don't know. Silence. The visitor looked uncomfortable. Eventually they became aware. Nobody spoke. The visitor swallowed. We think. The future stared. The creator stared. The witness stared. The entire city stared. The visitor raised both hands. I know how ridiculous that sounds. No, said the creator quietly. The ancient being's voice carried unusual seriousness. It doesn't. That answer worried everyone. The creator rarely sounded concerned. The visitor looked relieved. Then you understand. The creator nodded slowly. More than I'd like. The atmosphere shifted. Not toward fear. Toward mystery. The kind that existed before great discoveries. The visitor looked around the gathered crowd. Then revealed the reason they had truly come. We're searching for them. The silence deepened. The unresolved possibilities. Asterion frowned. You've never found them? The visitor laughed nervously. We found evidence. What kind of evidence? The visitor pointed upward. Toward the stars. Toward the darkness beyond known existence. Toward the places no explorer had fully mapped. Then came the answer. Someone keeps leaving messages. Nobody moved. The visitor's smile vanished completely. We've been receiving them for millions of years. The plaza became utterly silent. The creator's expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. The ancient being recognized something. That realization alone disturbed Asterion. The visitor continued. At first the messages were simple. A pause. We are here. Another pause. We remember. Another. We are waiting. The words echoed through the city. The visitor looked toward the future. Then toward the chain. Then toward Asterion. We thought they were a myth. The future spoke quietly. But you don't anymore. The visitors shook their head. No. Asterion crossed his arms. Why? The visitor took a slow breath. Then revealed the final piece. Because 3 years ago. The voice nearly whispered the words. They answered us. Silence. Absolute silence. The stars seemed distant. The city seemed far away. Even possibility itself felt quiet. The creator finally spoke. What did they say? The visitor looked toward the horizon. Toward somewhere impossibly far away. Then repeated the message exactly. Word for word. The first story is ending. Nobody understood. Not immediately. Then the creator's face lost all color. For the first time since anyone had known them, the oldest being in existence appeared genuinely shocked. The witness stared. The future stared. Asterion stared. Haley stared. Everyone stared. The creator whispered something. So softly that only a few nearby heard it. No. The visitor looked surprised. You know what it means? The creator slowly raised their eyes. Ancient eyes. Older than universes. Older than cycles. Older than creation. Eyes that had witnessed everything. And for the first time, those eyes contained uncertainty. Not confusion. Fear. Asterion had never seen that expression before. Neither had anyone else. The creator looked toward the distant darkness beyond all frontiers. Toward mysteries hidden even from possibility. Then. Finally spoke. The first story. The voice barely carried above a whisper. That's what existed before creation. Silence. The visitor blinked. The future froze. The witness stopped breathing. The creator continued. There was something before the first universe. Nobody moved. Before the cycle. A pause. Before me. The entire city seemed to hold its breath. The creator stared into the endless unknown. Then spoke the words that changed existence once again. I thought it was gone. Far beyond the horizon, beyond possibility, beyond even the stories that had not yet been written, something ancient stirred. Something older than creation. Something that remembered a reality before universes existed. And somewhere in that immeasurable darkness, another message was already traveling toward them. Not a greeting. Not a warning. A question. One that had waited since before the beginning of everything. For the first time in countless ages, nobody celebrated a new discovery. Not immediately. The revelation hung over existence like a storm gathering beyond sight. Something older than creation. Older than the creator. The concept itself felt wrong. Reality had been built upon certain assumptions. Even after the collapse of the cycle, after restored universes and living possibilities and civilizations beyond the frontier, one idea remained constant. There had been a beginning. Now that certainty was gone. The city of possibilities grew unusually quiet. Conversations continued. Research continued. Life continued. But beneath everything lurked a question nobody could ignore. What existed before the first story? The creator disappeared. Not dramatically. Not mysteriously. They simply left. One moment they stood among the crowd. The next they were gone. That worried everyone more than if they had announced some cosmic emergency. The creator never left during important events. Meanwhile, the message spread. Across realities. Across civilizations. Across stories. The oldest mystery imaginable had emerged. Naturally, scholars became impossible to manage. Entire universities suspended ordinary research. Philosophers entered states of ecstatic confusion. Historians openly wept with joy. Several scientific councils dissolved into arguments lasting months. The future found all of this fascinating. Estiurian found it exhausting. 3 weeks later he sat beside Haley on the familiar cliffs overlooking the interdimensional sea. The waves below glimmered with reflections from distant universes. For a long time neither spoke. Eventually Haley broke the silence. You look troubled. Estiurian laughed. That's because I am. Understandable. Another silence. Then he asked a question he rarely voiced aloud. Do you ever wish things had stayed simple? Haley looked toward the horizon. The answer came slowly. No. Estiurian raised an eyebrow. Not even a little? She smiled. Simple wasn't kind to us. That ended the discussion rather effectively. Estiurian leaned back and watched the stars. She was right. Their lives had never been simple. Painful, yes. Complicated, certainly. But simple? Never. The universe had always been larger than expected. Perhaps that was the point. Far beyond the frontier, exploration accelerated. The visitor civilization shared everything they knew. Millions of years of observations. Records. Messages. Patterns. Fragments. Most revealed little. The ancient sender remained elusive. The messages themselves were infrequent. Sometimes centuries passed between them. Yet a pattern slowly emerged. The messages weren't random. They were responses. Responses to events. Milestones. Turning points. Whenever existence changed significantly, another message appeared. The first universe. A message. The creation of the cycle. A message. The rise of the first civilizations. A message. The birth of the chain. A message. The collapse of the cycle. A message. The awakening of possibility. A message. As though something beyond reality had been watching the entire time. Observing. Waiting. The implication disturbed even the witness. 1. Afternoon, the witness found the future standing alone within the city's central archive. Millions of unrealized possibilities floated around them like stars. You've been quiet. The future glanced up. So have you. The witness sat nearby. For a while they watched the possibilities drift. Eventually the witness spoke. Are you afraid? The future considered the question carefully. Then nodded. The admission surprised them both. Why? The future looked toward the endless lights. Because this feels familiar. The witness frowned. How can it feel familiar? The future's expression grew distant. I am possibility. A pause. The closer something gets to becoming real, the easier it is for me to sense. The witness waited. The future continued. Whatever is approaching. The voice lowered. Has been approaching for a very long time. The statement sent a chill through the archive. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond all maps, the creator traveled alone. For the first time since before the first universe, they had returned to a place they swore never to visit again. The edge of memory. It wasn't a location. It was older than location. A boundary separating existence from something else. Something previous. The creator stood there quietly. The darkness beyond remained unchanged. Infinite. Silent. Patient. After a long time, the creator spoke. I know you're awake. Nothing happened. The darkness remained still. The creator waited. Then a voice answered. Not from the darkness. From everywhere. Everywhere at once. I was never asleep. The creator closed their eyes. The voice hadn't changed. Not after all this time. Not after all those ages. Not after all those stories. You shouldn't be here, said the creator. The darkness seemed amused. Neither should you. The creator didn't argue. Because it was true. For a while neither spoke. Then the voice returned. You made something beautiful. The creator looked back toward distant existence. Toward universes. Toward lives. Toward stories. A faint smile appeared. Sometimes. More often than you admit. The creator laughed softly. The old familiarity felt strange. Dangerous. Comforting. All at once. Then the smile faded. You sent the message. Yes. The first story is ending. Yes. Silence followed. The creator finally asked the question. What does it mean? The darkness answered immediately. The truth. Not helpful. Predictably. The creator sighed. Can you be specific? The darkness became quiet. For a very long time. Then came the answer. The first story is ending because it finally reached its conclusion. The creator stared. No. Yes. That's impossible. The darkness laughed. The creator immediately regretted saying that word. The laugh continued. Warm. Gentle. Ancient. Eventually it faded. Then the darkness revealed something unexpected. Something the creator had never considered. You think the first story was mine? Silence. The creator slowly looked up. The darkness continued. It wasn't. The implication landed like thunder. The creator remained motionless. For perhaps the first time in existence, they had no response. The darkness seemed sympathetic. You were a character. The creator stared into the infinite unknown. Then whispered, "What?" The answer came softly, like a parent explaining something to a child. The first story wasn't about creation. The darkness rippled. The first story wasn't about universes. More ripples. The first story wasn't even about me. The creator listened. Frozen. The darkness brightened slightly. Not with light. With memory. Then it spoke the final sentence. The sentence that would soon reshape everything once again. The first story was about whether someone would eventually ask what came before. Far away, across countless realities, the stars flickered simultaneously. The future looked up. The witness looked up. Estiarian looked up. Haley looked up. Every living being connected to existence looked toward the sky. And for the second time in history, words appeared among the stars. At the time she dismissed them as fantasies born from anticipation. Now those forgotten visions returned with terrifying clarity. Before anyone could ask further questions, another tremor shook the abyss. Buildings rattled. Cracks spread across stone roads. Far away, a mountain simply vanished, swallowed by darkness erupting from the ground. Panic swept through nearby settlements. People began running. Merchants abandoned carts. Families grabbed children and fled. Kale immediately shifted into command mode. Evacuate everyone north, he ordered. Use the fortress tunnels. Demonic soldiers rushed to obey. Agnelius stepped forward. I'll investigate the breach. You'll die alone, Kale replied. Then come with me. Their eyes locked. Months earlier such a suggestion might have triggered violence. Now necessity overruled pride. Haley interrupted before either could argue. I'm going too. Both men answered simultaneously. No. She crossed her arms. That's not a discussion. Kale looked ready to protest until he recognized the stubborn determination in her gaze. It reminded him of the first time they met, when she had walked alone into the abyss despite every warning. He sighed heavily. Fine. But you stay between us. I'm not a child. Exactly why I'm worried. Hours later they traveled toward the cosmic fracture accompanied by a small group of elite warriors. The journey led through territories few dared enter. Forests of crystal bones stretched endlessly beneath blood-red moons. Rivers flowed backward into floating whirlpools. Strange whispers echoed through the wind. Several times they encountered creatures fleeing the opposite direction, monsters usually considered apex predators. The sight unsettled even seasoned veterans. Whatever emerged from the vault terrified everything. Near midnight they reached the edge of devastation. The landscape looked as though a giant hand had torn reality apart. Entire valleys floated upside down. Fragments of ancient ruins drifted through the air. Stars appeared beneath their feet instead of overhead. At the center stood a colossal gateway composed of fractured darkness. Something moved inside. Haley felt an inexplicable pull drawing her closer. Then a voice echoed across existence itself. Mother. The word carried neither threat nor malice. Only loneliness. The gateway brightened. A figure emerged. At first glance he appeared to be a young man, perhaps 19 years old. Silver hair flowed past his shoulders. His eyes shone with pale blue light. He wore black armor resembling liquid night. Countless chains dangled from his wrists, broken links dragging behind him. Every step caused reality to ripple. The accompanying warriors immediately drew weapons. The stranger ignored them. His attention remained fixed entirely on Haley. I finally found you. Haley stood frozen. Rationally she knew this could not be her child. Her baby died before birth. Yet something inside her reacted instinctively. The same sensation she imagined mothers felt recognizing their children in crowded places. Who are you? She asked. Pain flickered across the young man's face. You named me Asterion. Silence followed. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The impossible statement hung in the air. Aeneas stepped forward protectively. Explain yourself. Asterion glanced toward him. For a brief moment cosmic power flashed behind those pale eyes. Every warrior instinctively retreated. Father. The single word hit Aeneas harder than any weapon. Kale immediately shifted beside Haley, ready to intervene. The situation had crossed beyond comprehension. Asterion looked between them all and slowly lowered his gaze. I know how this appears. You think? Kale replied. Surprisingly, Asterion laughed softly. You are exactly as Mother described. Haley blinked. I never described you to anyone. Not aloud. Asterion touched his chest. But I heard every story while I was growing. Growing. The absurdity of that word should have ended the conversation. Instead, Haley found herself listening. Tell me everything, she demanded. Asterion nodded. Then he revealed a truth stranger than any prophecy. When Haley lost her child, the blood bond connecting her and Aeneas created an unforeseen consequence. The unborn soul did not pass into death. Instead it became trapped between divine energy, mortal existence, and ancient forces sleeping beneath creation. The soul drifted through forgotten dimensions until eventually becoming imprisoned inside the vault of silence alongside primordial entities. Time flowed differently there. Centuries passed for Asterion while only years passed outside. Alone among monsters older than reality, he survived by learning. He grew stronger. Smarter. Harder. Yet throughout endless isolation he retained fragments of memories inherited from his parents. Haley's compassion. Aeneas's determination. Those memories became his anchor against madness. I spent lifetimes trying to escape, Asterion said quietly. Not for revenge. Not for power. I just wanted to meet you. Haley's eyes filled with tears. She hated herself for believing him so quickly. Yet every instinct screamed that he spoke the truth. Before anyone could respond, a roar thundered from inside the gateway. The sound alone shattered distant mountains. Asterion's expression changed instantly. Fear appeared for the first time. We need to leave. Another roar followed. This one closer. What is that? Aeneas asked. The reason the vault existed. Asterion turned toward the darkness. I wasn't the only prisoner. Something enormous began moving beyond the fracture. A single eye opened within the void. It was larger than cities. Golden and ancient beyond imagination. The sight drove several warriors to their knees. One immediately lost consciousness. Reality bent around the creature's gaze. Mountains dissolved into dust. Oceans visible in the distance rose into the air. Kale swore under his breath. That's not possible. Nothing about this is possible, Asterion replied. The colossal entity pushed forward. Its body remained hidden, but each movement widened the fracture. Entire sections of sky collapsed. Heavenly armies appeared overhead, arriving through portals. Demonic legions emerged from below. For the first time in history, heaven and hell stood on the same battlefield. Not against each other. Against a common enemy. Asterion looked toward Haley. Mother, I need you to trust me. What are you planning? The creature feeds on existence itself. If it fully enters reality, every realm dies. Then we'll fight it. Asterion smiled sadly. You can't. Before she could protest, chains erupted from his body and wrapped around the expanding fracture. The young man floated upward, suspended between worlds. Energy exploded around him. The creature roared in fury. Thousands of soldiers watched in stunned silence as Asterion alone resisted a being powerful enough to unravel creation. Yet Haley noticed something terrifying. Cracks were spreading across his skin. Every second weakened him. He was sacrificing himself. Again. Just like she once had. No, Haley whispered. Then louder. No. She rushed forward despite Kale's attempt to stop her. Aeneas followed immediately. The battlefield dissolved into chaos as the impossible family raced toward the center of a war that would decide the fate of heaven, hell, and every living soul between them. The ground exploded beneath Haley's feet as she ran. Waves of raw cosmic force erupted from the fracture, tearing apart entire sections of landscape. Soldiers scattered in every direction. Some vanished instantly when touched by unstable reality. Others found themselves thrown hundreds of feet through the air. Yet Haley continued forward, ignoring the danger. Above her, Asterion floated amid a storm of shattered stars and broken dimensions. The chains extending from his body glowed white-hot as they wrapped around the widening breach. Every link that tightened slowed the advance of the colossal entity lurking beyond existence. But the effort was destroying him. Cracks spread from his hands to his shoulders. Light leaked from the fractures in his skin. He looked less like a young man and more like a living constellation breaking apart. Asterion! Haley shouted. His eyes found hers immediately despite the chaos surrounding them. The expression on his face was heartbreaking. Not fear. Not pain. Relief. The relief of someone who had finally met the person he spent centuries longing to see. You shouldn't be here, he called down. I spent enough years losing people, Haley yelled back. I'm not losing you too. For the first time since emerging from the vault, Asterion's composure faltered. His lips trembled slightly. He looked like a child again. A child who had waited too long for a family. Then the creature struck. One enormous claw emerged from the darkness. Entire mountain ranges would have fit between its talons. The sight was so immense that the mind struggled to comprehend it. The claw slammed against Asterion's chains. Thousands of links shattered instantly. The resulting shockwave flattened armies across miles of terrain. Heavenly fortresses crumbled from the sky. Demonic citadels collapsed underground. Kale barely managed to shield nearby soldiers with a barrier of abyssal fire. Aeneas drove his spear into the earth to avoid being swept away. Above them, Asterion screamed. Blood streamed from his mouth. The fracture widened another 100 feet. The giant eye beyond the breach brightened with cruel intelligence. It was watching them. Studying them. Enjoying their struggle. Aeneas looked toward the assembled armies. Tens of thousands of warriors stood ready, yet all of them together seemed insignificant compared to the thing emerging from the void. The war god made a decision. He launched himself skyward. Divine fire exploded around him as he accelerated toward Asterion. What are you doing? Kale shouted. Aeneas never answered. He reached Asterion's side and placed both hands against the glowing chains. Instantly agony tore through his body. The chains were woven from forces older than creation itself. No god should have been able to touch them. Yet he held on. Father. Asterion stared at him in shock. You're not doing this alone. Aeneas pushed divine power into the chains. The broken links began reforming. New energy surged through the prison bindings. The fracture slowed. Not by much. But enough. Asterion's eyes widened. You'll die. Aeneas laughed grimly. I've survived worse. No, you haven't. The young man glanced downward toward Haley. Neither of us have. Below them, Kale watched the exchange. For several seconds conflicting emotions crossed his face. Jealousy. Frustration. Resignation. Then he sighed. Idiots. Black flames erupted around him. Ancient symbols appeared across his armor. Demons nearby immediately backed away in alarm. They recognized the transformation.
Kale was unlocking the curse that had haunted him for thousands of years.
Your Majesty, one commander shouted. Don't do this. Kale ignored him. The curse spread across his body like liquid darkness.
His silver hair turned black.
Crimson cracks covered his skin.
The air itself began freezing around him. Haley realized what was happening.
Kale.
He looked at her and smiled. It was the same smile she had fallen in love with beneath the ancient tree months earlier.
Warm. Gentle. Human.
I promised to protect our future. Then he launched himself upward. The curse amplified his power to terrifying levels. He reached the fracture in seconds and slammed both hands against the chains beside Aeneas.
Reality screamed. The effect was immediate. The widening breach finally stopped expanding. Astarion stared between both men.
One was his father. The other was the husband who had helped heal his mother's broken heart. Neither had any obligation to sacrifice themselves for him. Yet both were doing it anyway. Something changed inside him. For centuries he had survived alone. Every lesson learned in the vault taught him that isolation was the only reliable defense against suffering. Now, watching them, he understood something he had never truly
experienced. Family was not defined by blood alone. Family was choosing to remain when leaving would be easier.
The realization filled him with strength.
The chains brightened. New links formed.
The colossal creature roared in fury as the fracture began shrinking. For the first time, hope appeared.
Then heaven betrayed them again.
A beam of golden light streaked across the battlefield.
It struck Astarion directly in the back.
The young man cried out. His concentration shattered.
Several chains broke.
The fracture immediately expanded. Everyone turned toward the source. High above the battlefield floated dozens of heavenly nobles wearing ceremonial armor. At their center stood Archon Valerius, one of the oldest rulers in heaven.
Haley recognized him instantly.
He had served on the council responsible for her imprisonment.
What are you doing? Aeneas roared.
Valerius's expression remained cold. That creature should never have existed. He pointed toward Astarion.
Seal the breach by destroying the abomination. Disbelief swept through both armies. Even many heavenly soldiers looked horrified. He's saving us.
Haley shouted.
He's the reason we're still alive.
His existence threatens divine order, Valerius replied. We will not allow such a being to remain. Another beam of light fired.
Then another. Astarion blocked them, but each attack weakened him further.
The colossal entity behind the fracture immediately sensed opportunity.
More claws emerged from the darkness. Reality began collapsing faster than before. Kale stared at the heavenly nobles with murderous intent.
I knew heaven was stupid, he muttered.
I didn't realize it was suicidal. Aeneas's face darkened.
For years he had served heaven faithfully.
Fought its wars. Defended its borders. Obeyed its laws.
Yet in this moment he saw the institution with perfect clarity.
Pride mattered more to them than survival. Control mattered more than justice. They would rather doom existence than accept something beyond their authority.
His decision came instantly. He turned his spear toward the heavens. Any soldier who attacks my son attacks me.
The declaration echoed across the battlefield. Shock spread through divine ranks. Several commanders immediately withdrew from Valerius's formation. Others hesitated. Civil war loomed.
Haley felt years of pain, betrayal, and grief boiling inside her. The frightened woman imprisoned beneath heaven was gone. The broken victim who fled into the abyss no longer existed. She stepped forward and unleashed power she had suppressed for years. Oceans appeared in the sky. Vast spectral waves formed overhead. Water drawn from every sea across every realm answered her call.
Gods and demons alike stared in astonishment. They had forgotten what Haley truly was. Not merely a demigoddess. Not merely a healer. She was the daughter of a primordial sea deity. A force of nature disguised as a woman. "Touch my child again," she said quietly, "and I will drown heaven." Even Valerius hesitated. The battlefield fell silent. Then, from somewhere among the heavenly ranks, a single soldier lowered his weapon. Another followed. Then a third. Soon entire divisions abandoned Valerius's command. Demons laughed openly as more heavenly warriors crossed the battlefield to stand beside Haley. The old order was breaking apart before everyone's eyes. But the victory lasted only seconds. Because the colossal entity finally forced half its body through the fracture. The sight obliterated all other concerns. It was larger than continents. Its shape shifted constantly between impossible forms. Wings made from dead stars unfurled across the sky. Thousands of eyes opened simultaneously. Entire civilizations could have lived and died within its shadow. Estiurian's face went pale. "Run," he whispered. Nobody moved. The entity looked down upon creation. Then it smiled. And every living being on the battlefield understood a horrifying truth. The creature had not been trying to escape. It had been waiting. Waiting for enough energy. Waiting for enough conflict. Waiting for enough souls gathered in one place. The war between heaven and hell, the breaking of the vault, even Estiurian's escape, none of it had been accidental. They were pieces of a plan set in motion long before any of them were born. And now, at last, the ancient being had everything it needed. Far above the battlefield, the stars began going dark one by one. One star vanished. Then another. Then 10 more disappeared in rapid succession. Across every realm, people looked skyward in terror as familiar constellations blinked out like candles caught in a storm. The darkness spreading between worlds was not merely an absence of light. It was consumption. Entire stars were being devoured. The ancient entity stretched its impossible wings, and with every movement reality groaned under unbearable pressure. Oceans rose from their shores. Mountains fractured. Time itself became unstable. On distant battlefields long concluded, forgotten soldiers briefly reappeared before fading again. Cities experienced moments from centuries earlier. Children saw older versions of themselves walking beside them. Cause and effect were unraveling. The creature's countless eyes surveyed creation with amusement. It was not angry. It was not hungry in the mortal sense. It regarded existence the way a person might regard dust gathering on a shelf. Something insignificant that had accumulated where it did not belong. Estiurian stared upward with growing horror. Memories buried deep within his centuries inside the vault suddenly resurfaced. Fragments of conversations overheard among the other prisoners. Warnings scratched into stone by mad entities older than universes. A name. A title. A purpose. "I remember," he whispered. Haley looked up at him. "Remember what?" His face had gone completely white. "It's not a prisoner." Every eye turned toward him. "Then what is it?" Aeneas demanded. Estiurian swallowed. "It's a gardener." Silence followed. Then confusion. The answer made no sense. Yet Estiurian continued speaking. Before heaven existed, before demons existed, before stars existed, there were beings responsible for shaping realities. Most created life. Some protected it. A few destroyed failed creations so new ones could begin. His gaze remained fixed on the colossal entity. This one was sent to erase our universe. The implications struck like lightning. Not conquer. Not rule. Erase. The creature was not a monster seeking dominion. It was an executioner fulfilling an ancient purpose. Kale's curse flames flickered around him. "You're telling me this thing destroys entire universes?" "Not destroys." Estiurian's voice trembled. Harvests. Above them, the entity raised one enormous hand. Galaxies swirled inside its palm.
Then it closed its fingers. In the far distance, an entire section of night vanished.
Millions of stars disappeared simultaneously.
Even from their impossible distance, the loss was visible.
Collective terror swept across heaven and hell alike. For the first time in recorded history, gods looked afraid.
Valerius, who moments earlier had been obsessed with preserving divine authority, now stared upward in mute horror.
His ambitions had become meaningless.
Every kingdom, every throne, every law suddenly seemed absurdly small.
The creature spoke. Its voice emerged from everywhere at once.
Every living being heard it in their own language.
Cycle complete.
The words echoed through existence.
Preparation for renewal has begun.
Then cities started disappearing.
Not exploding. Not burning. Vanishing. Entire regions blinked out of existence as though erased from a painting. Screams echoed across distant realms. Millions died in moments. Haley's knees nearly buckled. She sensed countless lives extinguishing simultaneously.
Every healer's instinct inside her recoiled.
She wanted to save everyone. Yet how could anyone save worlds from a force capable of erasing galaxies? Asterion suddenly descended from the fracture.
The chains remained wrapped around the breach, now holding it barely stable. He landed beside Haley, Aeneas, and Kale. Blood streamed from dozens of cracks across his body.
Time was running out.
There is one chance, he said.
One.
Tell us, Haley replied immediately.
Asterion hesitated.
The vault wasn't merely a prison.
It was also a lock. Aeneas understood first. The creature can be imprisoned again. Not exactly. Asterion looked toward the fracture. The lock requires a living key. Nobody spoke.
Nobody needed clarification.
Haley's face drained of color. No. Asterion smiled sadly. Mother, no. Please listen. I spent years mourning you. Her voice cracked. I just found you. Asterion's expression softened.
And those moments meant everything.
Haley grabbed his shoulders. We're finding another way. There isn't one. There has to be.
I searched for centuries.
For a moment neither moved.
The battlefield seemed to fade around them.
They were simply a mother and son confronting an impossible reality. Asterion gently covered her hands with his own. The truth is,
I was never supposed to survive this long.
Tears finally escaped Haley's eyes. Don't say that. But I did survive. He laughed softly. Long enough to meet you.
Long enough to know who my parents are.
Long enough to see what love feels like.
His gaze shifted toward Aeneas.
And long enough to know my father isn't the man his mistakes made him believe he was. Aeneas lowered his head.
He had faced armies without fear.
Yet this conversation left him feeling helpless.
I don't deserve forgiveness.
Probably not.
Asterion's answer surprised him. Then the young man smiled.
But I think Mother deserves peace.
And hating yourself forever won't give her that.
For several seconds Aeneas could not speak. Finally he managed a rough laugh. You sound older than me. I am older than most civilizations. Kale barked out an unexpected laugh.
Even Haley managed a tearful smile. The brief moment of warmth ended when another section of sky vanished.
The entity was accelerating. Reality would not survive much longer. Asterion looked toward Kale next.
Take care of her.
Kale immediately shook his head. Don't.
You're the reason she learned how to smile again.
Don't. Promise me. Kale's jaw tightened.